Okay, I'm going to break this drawing down into steps that are way easier to follow than you might imagine, so that you can have a go, create this, and amaze yourself. Okay, so as always in these tutorials, I'm going to break it down into steps so that you learn about the painting process and techniques, as well as about the tools within the app I'm using, Procreate. But that isn't to say you couldn't use a different app on a different tablet and still follow along. Having said that, within the app Procreate, I'm using their default A4 canvas size, which is 297 by 210 millimeters at 300 dpi. I'm also using one of their default color profiles, which is the sRGB code, the one that ends in 2.1. Again, it's here on the list by default. Also by default are the brushes that I'm going to be using. They come free with the app, and I'm going to be using within inking, the Studio Pen. Within artistic, I'm going to use the Leatherwood brush, which may look a bit different. I will amend it and I will show you how to do that. Within airbrushing, I'm going to use the soft brush, the medium brush, and the medium hard brush. Within elements, I might use the clouds brush. And within luminance, I'll be using the light pen. And then in terms of the colors, well, I've already pre-selected a color palette for this tutorial. Each of the colors, if you tap on it within the palette and go to the value section, you'll notice here it has what we call a hexadecimal code that you put into this box. And each of those codes are down in the video description. You just need to copy and paste them one at a time into this box and press enter. The color appears in the top circle up here, and then just tap it into the palette area yourself. Or again, next to the codes that are in the description is a link that takes you to my Patreon page where you can download the color file for free. That will save you some time. Patreon is also the place where you can support this channel and gain access to exclusive content such as extended versions of many of these tutorials. I'd like to say a massive thank you to those people who do support me over at Patreon. It really does make a huge difference. Thank you so much. And if you don't like the idea of using Patreon, well, I've just opened up the memberships here on YouTube. I've only put it at the $1 or £1 support level, just as a way of people gaining access to badges and priority answers to their questions. And with all of that said and done, we're going to get started. So the first thing we're going to do on layer 1 is we're going to go to our colors. We're going to choose the first color on the top row. I'm going to drag from the color circle at the top into the middle of the canvas area and release, and it just flood fills the whole canvas. Now, please be aware that although I've given you the color codes and the color palette to download, when you put it on your iPad, it might just look a little bit different than it does on your screen here. And that's just really down to the camera that I'm using. So don't worry about that. Okay, I'm going to go to my layers again. I'm going to use another layer, layer 2. Go to my second color on the top row. I'm going to go in with the airbrushing soft brush. I'm going to put it pretty big, 50% on the size and 100% opacity, and then just straight through the middle. Do a band of that. I'm then going to go to the adjustments, the Gaussian blur. I'm going to blur that in to about the 50%, and deselect. I'm going to go to my layers, create a new layer, layer 3. Go to the third color on the top row. Still with the soft brush, within airbrushing, I'm going to put it to maybe 20% size, and then just a little bit down from the halfway point, maybe 2/3 of the way down. We'll do a band of that across, hold it so it snaps to a straight line, then we can go back to the adjustments, the Gaussian blur, and we'll blur it in again, this time maybe to about the 40%, and then deselect it again. Go to our layers and create a new layer, layer 4, and we'll go to the fourth color. We'll go back in with the soft brush again, but we're going to reduce it down even further, 10%, 100% opacity still, and again, low down here, we'll do a band of this, hold it until it snaps to a straight line, then adjustments, Gaussian blur, and we'll just blur that in again. This time I think about 30%, and deselect. Next, I'm going to go to my layers again and create a new layer, layer 5. I'm going to go this time to the selection tool over here and put it on rectangle. Just zoom it up a little bit. And for this lower section, you might need to take a couple of goes at this just to get it in the right placement. I want to select like the lower section. Now, I'm probably going to do it, try again, just aim for the kind of middle of the lighter section there. So I'll just do it from the outer edge, something like that. Deselect. Back to my colors. I'm going to go to the first colour on the middle row and then drag it into that area and release, then deselect. And with that whole layer, I'm just going to go to the adjustments, the Gaussian blur, and just blur it in a little bit, maybe not too much, just about 3%, deselect. I'm then going to go to the layer, tap on it and put on the alpha lock, which means if I add anything new to it now, and I'll just show you this, it's going to stop at the boundary there, it won't go anywhere outside of that original shape. Now with the alpha lock on, with the airbrushing soft brush still, probably going to choose a really nice dark colour, so maybe I'll go for the 5th colour on the middle row. And we're just going to create a nice gradient now from the lightest part of the ground, which is going to be near the horizon, to some of the darker tones, which won't be the dominant colour when we get down here, but when we do have dark tones, the darkest bit of it will be down here. So we're going to put the size of the soft brush to 15%, 100% opacity, and just do a band of that all the way across the bottom. Then again, adjustments, Gaussian blur, and we'll just blur that in. It's about the 40% and deselect. I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to tap on it and put on the clipping mask, which creates a little arrow that links it to the layer underneath it, which is in this case layer 5. That means when I go on to this layer with any detail, it will stop at the boundary that we had on layer 5, which is really useful. We're going to go to the artistic leatherwood brush. Now I'm going to tap on it again and show you the settings. So within stroke path, I've changed it to 50% spacing and 50% jitter. And click done. I'm going to go for the second colour on the middle row. 2% size, maybe 40% strength, opacity. And you don't need to be overly neat about this because you can't add it anywhere that you shouldn't. So we'll just do some passes across this. We're just generally adding some texture to the ground all the way across. Quite an easy and satisfying kind of technique. You can just sort of sideways scribble it in. It is pressure sensitive, this brush, so the more you press, the bigger the shapes, the more you'll notice. Maybe as you get further down, we should press them in a bit more. So press more as we come further towards us, less at the top, and then gradually press more and more. It's quite a good technique. And again, it's just creating that perspective of texture. So press lightly in the distance and then gradually press more and more. And we cover quite a lot of, well, ground, so to speak, by doing this. Go. And that's got us started, and there's a long way to go with that texture, but it's a good starting point. We'll stay on the same layer. Perhaps we'll go for the 3rd colour, and we'll do something similar. So again, we just want to build up some of the textures here, so we're building it in. And again, we don't need to be particularly fussy about this. We're just sort of scribbling it in, adding it into the mix. Perhaps one thing we could do maybe is just aim for the kind of middle distance with a middle pressure as well. It's not as hard as it could be, but not as light either. So again, just move across the canvas like this. Going with the 4th colour, and we're going to do something similar again. Except this time I'm going to perhaps set a boundary. So we'll put it at the just into the 3% size, and we'll put it maybe at 50% opacity. And I want to just create an area here. I'll do that. Hold it at the other end so it snaps to a straight line. And then we can go over it a few times in this area. Press lightly, bring it across. You can see it much more distinctly now with this dark colour. And then just into those distant areas, I'm going to push it back there a little bit, press lightly, create some more kind of bands of that, but not quite as obvious. I'm doing it lightly, just to push it back a little bit. I do love the way that this brush can create some really useful texture. It's a much quicker way of creating this kind of thing. You know, if you were trying to create all of these points of texture individually, then it would take you very much longer than this process. There's a great way of just speeding it up a little bit. Push it back there a little bit more, not too far up towards that horizon line, otherwise you're going to lose some of that perspective. And then as we come further down here, we can press on more, bring it down, press on more. Really quite pressing hard with this brush at these lower areas, and that's fine. Perhaps I ought to put the size of that brush up to 4% and go over this bottom area again. Getting closer to us. Go over it for another time. Again, just in this lower area below that kind of band, that line that we created. Now, I think I could just ramp that up a hint. So we can go to layer 6, go to the adjustments, the hue, saturation, brightness, and change the brightness from 50% just down 1 degree is enough to 49. And it's just ramped up the saturation of that dark color in quite a nice way, I feel. So now looking at that, I feel like I want to ramp the brightness up near that horizon a little bit. So I'm going to go to layer 4 and create a new layer above that, which is now layer 7. But crucially, it's underneath layer 5 and 6. I'm going to go in with the soft brush with an airbrushing, and I'm going to go to the 6th color on the top row. So with the soft brush, I'm going to put it to 5% size and maybe 25% opacity. And then just from this side over to the other, snap until it holds, or sorry, rather hold it until it snaps to a straight line. And that's already nicer, I feel. Adjustments, Gaussian blur, just blur that in just so we don't have that hard line edge. 15% definitely is enough. Deselect. And you can see the difference with it now. It just really ramps up that glow. So I'm quite happy with that overall general look, lighting, but we're going to add some more details now to the sky area. So I'm going to go to the top layer and create a new layer above that, layer 8. I'm going to go in with the Elements Clouds brush, and I'm going to go for the 7th color on the top row. I'm going to have it at 15% size and, well, quite low, maybe about 15% strength opacity as well. I'm just going to create some texture here, tap it in, circle it in a little bit, and it's going to be quite subtle initially, bringing it down maybe in a slight kind of diagonal. And as it comes towards that horizon glow, it's going to kind of just dissolve and disappear into that area. You're going to notice it more near the top region, I suppose. Just do a section of it here and just not to kind of peter out at the edges. Don't do too much of it beyond that central area. Maybe try the 8th color, the white, just to ramp it up a little bit. Tap it in. Quite a nice textured brush anyway. Has that kind of cloud look, obviously. Just tap it in a few times, in and around. Subtlety is fine. Quite happy for it to remain slight without overdoing this. We could also go in with a slightly darker color, maybe the 9th color on the middle row. And we could start to bring in just some extra texture in some of these outer areas with the darker color too, just to vary it up a little bit. Just kind of squiggle it in around different areas. Doesn't need to be overly fussed and labored on. Just squiggle around. As we get towards the upper area, maybe we could just spend a bit more time focused up there, a bit heavier up there compared to near the horizon. Maybe go back in with the 1st color on the top row. Just add some of that cool gray in there a little bit, disrupting some of those warm glow colors in there as well. Okay, we can go back to that, but we're going to go to our layers again and create a new layer, layer 9. We're going to go in with the Luminance light pen, and well, we may as well go for the white color, which is the 8th color on the top row. Now we don't need these to be absolutely intensely bright, so we'll put them at 50% opacity and maybe about 10% size. And then I'm going to pick a corner to begin with and just start to add some points. You don't want them too evenly spaced. It's okay to create some clusters. And I'm not pressing on, I'm not jamming it in to get that intensity. I want them to be quite subtle. Got quite a lot of light in the sky anyway, so it makes sense if they're a little bit more subdued. They're a subtle element. Not to say that we won't have one or two that really zing and pop out a little bit more, like that for example, but we don't need to oversell these. So we're going to create maybe a nice square of them in here. A rectangle, it doesn't really matter. Just try not to make too obvious a shape, because we are going to duplicate the layer and repeat it. We can always go back and add some really dominant stars in here afterwards. So we're just creating a nice sort of initial star texture. It's really quite simple to do this. I find it useful to rest my palm. We've got palm rejection, so it's okay to touch the screen. I always make sure that my fingers are set so they don't do anything on screen. If you haven't already changed that, you need to do that, because otherwise you'll inadvertently be adding things to your image that you don't mean to. Okay, so we've got a section there. I'm going to go to that layer and slide and duplicate it, which you can see intensifies it, but we're not going to leave it there. We're going to go to the transform, flip it horizontally, flip it vertically, and then we can just move it to the next section and deselect. And then we've spread some of the stars across the sky, but we're not going to stop there either. We're going to take those two layer 9s and just pinch them together, merge them together. Again, slide and duplicate. Again, transform. Maybe this time, yeah, we'll do the same. Flip horizontally and flip vertically, and then slide it across. Just move the whole canvas so you can see. Now we're getting a little bit of an obvious duplication there, but we'll amend that later. It's fine. In fact, it's not even that glaring. It's not that obvious. So again, I'm not too bothered. Two layer 9s, pinch them together, which if you find is a bit tricky, just go backwards so I can show you that. Go to the top version, tap on it, and then tap on merge down. That's probably the easiest way to do it in many ways. Now I've got a subtle suggestion of stars there, but I do want to ramp it up more, so I'm going to go and slide it, duplicate it again, transform, flip it vertically and flip it horizontally. Maybe on the freeform within transform, just squish it, condense it into maybe that original half perhaps. And with the top version, slide and duplicate it again, transform, flip it horizontally and vertically, and then just move it across here to this side this time. And again, we're getting some slight awkwardness. If that's true, then try flipping it vertically. Maybe that's better. Pinch all those layer 9s together once more, slide and duplicate it, and we'll keep doing this until we're satisfied with the overall result. So this time on that version, I'm going to slide it down. Maybe I'll just pinch it over to the side more. Doesn't have to be to the halfway. Slide and duplicate it, transform, flip it horizontally, move it over to this side. Again, you can have it going off the edge of the canvas even, it doesn't matter. Move it down to this section. And just keep doing it until you're satisfied with the overall result. I'm going to, again, just pinch all the layer 9s together, slide and duplicate it, select, maybe squash it in. It's on freeform, so I'm going to squash it in, put it down into this lower area. Now I've got a good coverage of the whole sky. I'm going to pinch or tap, merge down the layer 9s, slide and duplicate. Now the top version, perhaps I'll show you another way because we want them slightly less towards the horizon. So what I could do is go with the eraser, set to soft brush, quite big, maybe 20%, and maybe about 20% strength. And just go over that bottom area a few times. So it is slightly more subdued compared to the top. It's not dramatically different, but it's more definitely ramping it up near the top. Tap on the top version, merge down. Now it's all on one layer. Like we said before, if you can go in with the eraser, set to the soft brush, put it really quite small, maybe 2% size, 100% opacity. And if you've got any awkward little bits there where you've got things that are just a bit too close to each other and you don't like it, you can just go in there and you can amend that. Find the balance that you think works best. Don't live with it as it is if you're not happy with it. And then in addition to that, we're still on the top layer. We're still going to use the luminance light pen, still with a white color, 10% size, maybe put it up, 100% opacity this time. And then we can just go in there and we can create one or two stars that really just pop a little bit more. It's all just about the right kind of balance, really. You don't want to do necessarily too much of this. Whatever you feel works best. Now, if you're really clever and want to add constellations to yours and you know about stars, then go for it. I really don't. So I'm just creating a hint, a suggestion of stars rather than being specific. Maybe just a few more in this kind of lighter area. And then I'm also going to go back to layer 8. Also going to go back to the elements clouds brush. And we'll go for the 8th color on the top row again. Maybe 10% size this time and 15% opacity. And I'm just going to bring out some of the brightness in this area. Might even put it up a little bit more actually, 30% strength. Tap in a little bit more of this. Don't need this to be overly vivid, but I think it helps just to bring it in a little bit more. I quite like that. Just tapping it in and around So I'm going to create a new layer. We're going to go in with the airbrushing soft brush initially, and we're going to go for the fourth color on the middle row, and maybe about a third of the way in, just a little bit below that horizon line. I'm going to put a blob there just to demark where we're going to put the base of the tree. I'm going to change to the medium hard brush with an airbrushing, 2% size, 100% opacity. I'm going to draw our tree trunk, make it quite sturdy. Want to create our main branches initially. Nothing much beyond that point though. Just some main branches like that. Don't overly agonize on them. I wouldn't spend too long on them initially. Just set the foundation kind of branches in there, and then we're going to change brush. We're going to go to the inking studio pen, 15% size, 100% opacity. And then what I'm going to do is start with the outer edges, press lightly, and then press more as we get towards our main branches again. And again, we're just adding to these branches. So press lightly at the outer edges, press more as it joins the branch like that. Press lightly, wobble the branch around a little bit, and then join it back in. Find it preferable to start at the outer edges and just generally drag them in, wobble them a little bit, press on more. Find that the easiest way, the most effective way of creating branches. Find if you start from here and then you try to do them out, they just, I don't know, they doesn't somehow work as effectively for me. Extend some of these out a bit further perhaps. Wiggle them around, find a place for them to exist. Have them crossing over each other, that's absolutely fine. Create a new layer. And on this new layer, we're going to go to the rainforest brush within organic, tap on it, change the spacing from 27 to about 45%, click done. We're going to have it at 2% size, 60% opacity, and then just at these outer edges, we're going to start building in the texture. We can add more fine branches to this in a short while. We're just going to get the general kind of textures in there initially. We need the main branches in there just to give the ability to add foliage. I don't want this to be an overly dense foliaged tree. I just want it to be quite sparse, quite wispy. Just scribble it in around the edges. I'm going to change colour. I'm going to go backwards to the third colour, just a slightly warmer hue, and we'll just circle that in around the outer edges a little bit. In fact, another way we could do that perhaps is tap on it, put on the alpha lock, and then, well, we can change the colour on the outer edges without even adding any more density to it, especially because it will just warm it up around those edges. Now go back in and turn the alpha lock back off so we can continue adding. Don't feel like I need to do too much more to the tree at this stage. Go back to the fourth colour, maybe just have that a little bit denser in places. Got some of those light wispier areas, so maybe just a few that are a little bit darker. Again, I don't need this tree to be overly dense. I kind of want it to be almost ghostly. I think it's quite nice in the context of this landscape. I'm just going to go to the top two layers and pinch them together, or tap on the top one and merge down. Now it's on one layer, and I'm going to go to the transform, freeform, squash it down, pinch it in from the sides too, find a more appropriate size for it. I want a bit more space at the top there really, and deselect. I think that works better. Now I'm going to create a barn structure, so I'm going to create a new layer, layer 11. I'm going to go in with the airbrushing soft brush, and I'm going to keep it on the fourth colour. And I'm going to create a triangle. Hold it until it snaps, and then freeform, or transform freeform. And we can stretch it then, find the right kind of placement for it. I want it to be next to the tree, but not too jammed right against it. Maybe about there. And I don't want it to be too much of an equilateral triangle either. I want it to be more stretched out, but not too much. And I want the distance between the triangle and the horizon line to be, well, maybe similar to the actual height of it. So maybe I'll squash it a bit more. So the height of it is similar to the distance, like that. So you've got a similar gap there from there to there. Deselect. Once we've got that triangle, we can slide and duplicate it. Transform, put it on uniform, pinch it in from the corner. So it's a slightly smaller version of that triangle. Move it over here. Drop it down slightly as well, but not too much. Just think about the distance from there to there. We don't want it to be too dramatic, so maybe about there. Take those two layers, pinch them together, or tap on the top version and merge down. Back to the soft airbrush. But let's change it from the soft brush to the medium hard brush, why not? 2% size, 100% opacity, and just join from there to there. Hold it until it snaps. Once we got that, I'm just going to drag into that one, drag into that one. I want to preserve the triangle at the front, but just kind of blot in the other areas. I do feel like it's a little bit stretched out, so if yours does too, then transform, freeform, and just squish it in a little bit more. I think that works a little bit better. Deselect. Yeah, I'm happier with that. Still with the medium brush with an airbrushing, we're just going to bring it down at the edges, maybe turn it down more again. So bottom end of 2%, hold it so you get that nice vertical line. Down from here, hold it, there you go. And then, well, we're going to create a hint of a corner. So from this point, we'll do down so it snaps. And I kind of want that to be a little bit lower, maybe just set it to there. I don't want it to be overly dramatically different. So that would be horizontal, and just move it a hint down from this corner to that point as well. So it's just subtly creating some perspective, but it's not over the top. I'm just going to drag to flood fill that little square there, and then, well, I'll do that triangle there as well. And, you know, it's a bit clumsy, so we can go in just fine tune that. I don't want to necessarily lose some of this, so I'm happy for it to join together there. I don't care about that edge, and it's here that I just need to preserve it a little bit. So press lightly so it doesn't completely eliminate it. You can still see it a little bit, and that's useful. And then probably pick a different color for this one. So maybe go for the 6 color for this face, and it's just a hint different. It's going to be affected by the light in a different way, and I don't really care about preserving straight lines on the edge too much. Just fill it in like so. Perhaps we'll create a little chimney, so we'll go back to the 4th color, still with the medium brush, medium hard brush, create a little rectangle up there, and then just a little bit angled up so it becomes like this, subtle. Again, that doesn't need to be labored on particularly, just fine tune these little details. We're going to create some nice textures in there now anyway, so that will disguise much of that. So perhaps we will create a new layer for the texture on top. So layer 12, we'll go for the 6 color on the middle row, and we'll go to the soft brush with an airbrushing. We'll turn it down to maybe 40% strength, low on the 2% size, and I'm just really going to start tapping in some of this texture, and actually it's not particularly complicated. I'm just really mottling it in there. It's really going to be quite a clumsy, organic looking structure in a way. Don't want it to look particularly neat. We're going to have something of a doorway here to preserve, so maybe just sketch that in a little bit. But then in and around that, we're going to be adding this kind of nice mottled texture. Perhaps we'll go to the front face and maybe work on that. So we'll go to the 9th color, same brush, same settings for the most part. Perhaps I'll turn it down a little bit, maybe 20%. We're just building it in kind of gradually. Just to preserve the edges, maybe to make it quicker, we can tap and put on the clipping mask, which means I can go right up to the edge without worrying about being neat on that outer line. Just now really go for that texture And all I'm doing is tapping it in, mottling it in, not a neat approach at all. Building up an effect. And as we come into the middle area, put it down to maybe 15% or so, just on this corner. Tap it in a little bit. For the roof, we're going to go for maybe the 7th colour. Low on the, in fact, 1% size, still at the, the 15% strength opacity. We're going to tap in some gestures in this kind of a direction. Again, not overly articulated. I don't feel like it requires it. It's mainly a kind of silhouetted look anyway. We're going to get hints. Building some texture kind of going that way. And if anything, I feel like the lines we had initially are a bit too regular. So we'll go back to layer 11 with the eraser set to the medium hard brush with an airbrushing. 2% size, 100% opacity. And if anything, maybe we should go in there and just make it less precise, more ramshackled, more kind of wobbles. I think if anything, that's going to just add to the look. I think it would look worse if it was too regular. I don't think that's the kind of look we're going for this. Keep that rough look. I think that already is just kind of working better. Go back to the layer 12, back in with the 7th colour, and just move at this angle, creating some suggestion of a roof. Then we've got the chimney, just maybe on this face of it, just create a bit more of a highlight, preserve the darkness on the left side of it, turn it down 1%, maybe just go over this part a few times, bring it out. I'm going to change to a lighter colour. So let's go for something down here, maybe the 7th colour on the bottom row. Same settings with the brush, but maybe I could just add some highlights on the top. Not too much, just things that have perhaps settled and just reflect the light a little bit. Just breaks it up a little bit. Not too much of that either. Now I'm going to go for a warmer colour. I'm going to go for the 2nd colour on the bottom row. Still, in fact, now we'll go for a medium brush this time with an airbrushing. 1% size, 20% strength. And just on this edge, I'm going to have some sharper details. So turn it down even lower on the 1%. Allow some gaps to remain. Create a really nice kind of rough look. Again, we want not a straight line along down this edge at all. I want it to be really textured, almost impressionistic at a building itself. Really not something that I want to be neat. Move along that top edge. We're going to add more texture in here, and it's going to be more about the lighting and the effect of it rather than the architectural detail, really. I'm allowing this to be really quite rough. That is the look we're going for. Move some of this texture across. Can move it all the way to the edge. Again, we have the clipping mask on, so it's not a problem. You can take it right up to the edge. It doesn't need to be particularly neat. And on this side, it's really dark, so we need to just turn this down to maybe 5%. Same colour, same brush. And we're going to continue that effect, but it's going to be way more subtle because the percentage is down. Just creating more texture in the shadow side. And again, we're going to preserve an area for a doorway. So maybe we can just block that in a little bit. Maybe turn the brush up, 2%. Blot in areas a little bit more. Turn it back down, 1%. Maybe some lighter areas. Maybe we should go back in here with some darker colours. In fact, again, we're just starting to build up the impression. So we'll go for the 5th colour, 1% size, maybe a bit darker with this, or a bit stronger rather, 20%. Let's go even stronger, let's go for 40%. We just need to get this structure's doorway in here a little bit more solidly. Again, we're just really being suggestive rather than getting bogged down in any details whatsoever, really. I think this kind of image benefits from that. I think that it's what it needs. Okay, it's about time we tackled the main doorway that's going to be spewing light onto this whole scene and really dramatically affect it. So this is where it's really going to be crucial now. So we'll go to layers, create a new layer, layer 13, go in with the medium brush with an airbrushing, go to the fourth color on the bottom row, and we'll just create a nice rectangle to begin with. Set in, color it in, just to set the glow. And again, we don't need to be any particular straight lines with this, just get it in there suggestive initially, turn it down 5%, and then just we're going to have a little bit of a kind of an archway above the top and around it there. Okay, and then I'm going to go to the luminance light pen, and I'm going to use the 10th color on the bottom row, 10% size, 30% strength, and just initially on this left side we've got an opening there, and again we don't need to keep it regular or neat, we can have it quite patchy, quite broken, just suggestive of light coming from there, maybe just catching the frame as it spills out and then spilling out onto the ground. Keep it lumpy, there's some things on the ground that are just going to catch the light in an irregular way perhaps. Again, this doesn't need to be particularly laboured on or neat, just suggestive like that. And then we can just extend that line, kind of wobble it, trail it off, release the pressure like so. And then going to change to maybe the airbrushing soft brush, 2% size, maybe 10% strength. I'm just going to build in this effect in a little bit more too. Extend that across. I'm going to go to same layer, same color, artistic, leatherwood brush, same settings we had before. 1% size and maybe 10% strength. And I'm just going to start layering up the effect in this area now. Build it in. We want a real kind of streak across this area, bringing in this color quite dramatically into our scene. Maybe just put the intensity up. In fact, let's put it to 20% or so. Extend that across. I'm just going to change to the inking studio pen, same color, 2% size, maybe 50% strength, and I'm just going to have a few blades of grass just in here in the brightest areas. Just brings out a little extra texture there that I think is quite nice. I'm going to change to a different color. I'm going to go backwards to the 8th color, and we're going to go back to the artistic leatherwood brush. I'm just going to bring this across so it goes from the brightest color to a slightly warmer color. We definitely want this to be dramatic, and going over it lots of times. It's only at the 1% size and the 20% strength. 21% doesn't really matter. And I'm going to bring this across here as well. Perhaps I'll put it up 50%, lower down on the 1%, maybe just split it slightly. Different layers of land, just catching the light in a slightly different way. A few bands, I think will work. Bring it across here. It's quite effective. I think we need a general kind of shadow area here, so I'm also staying in the same layer. I'm going to go for the 5th color on the middle row. I'm going to go back to the organic rainforest brush, 2% size, 100% opacity, and I'm just going to start merging in these different areas, low-lying kind of shadow and organic matter, just kind of merging it all together a little bit. The tree and the ground in the shadow part. Maybe I can go back to the artistic leatherwood brush, bring some of that darkness in here as well on the ground. Got a 50% size and 1% size, maybe 2% size. Be better. Extend this across from that point where the tree is, bring in some nice darkness. Just to balance out the light, so we've got the light there and the dark there. I think the kind of combination of the two alongside each other kind of works nicely. Then we're going to go for maybe the 9th color on the bottom row, still with the leatherwood brush, 5% size, 50% strength, and then have some nice bits of that texture here in the foreground. Start to change it up a little bit. Over a few times. Quite a nice effect. I'm going to go to my layers and create a new layer. Tap on it, change the normal to add. I'm going to go in with the rainforest brush with the first color on the bottom row, and well, I'm just going to circle in 2% size, 30% strength, just circle in and around that doorway, and it's just going to bring out the glow generally there. And I think that that's really quite a nice way of just building out the texture and glow in that particular area. So on that top layer, I'm going to create a new layer, layer 15. I'm going to go in with the rainforest brush, and I'm going to go in with second color on the middle row, 1% size, maybe 40% strength. Just going to create a suggestion of things in the distance here, just to break up that horizon line a little bit. Doesn't need to be anything particularly detailed or involved, just a suggestion of things going off there in the distance, points of interest, like so. Okay, I'm going to leave this tutorial here at this point. I hope you've enjoyed following along. I will be adding more detail on the extended version over at my Patreon page. Again, a link for my Patreon is down in the video description. Otherwise, I hope you've enjoyed watching. Please remember to hit subscribe, and I shall see you back here soon. Bye for now.